All right, so we've got an interesting one for this deep dive. It's a short story, and the setting is a party, but it's not your typical, balloons and, like a fun, lighthearted gathering.
Yeah, not exactly a lighthearted party.
No, it takes place in this like grand manner,
Mm.
and there's this eerie feeling throughout the whole thing. And it's late autumn too, so that kind of adds to the whole atmosphere.
Yeah, it's like the perfect setup for something spooky.
Right. Yeah.
When you have that juxtaposition,
Mm-hmm.
you've got the festive occasion, but then this underlying sense of unease, and it just immediately draws you in.
Totally. And then you've got this young woman, Sophia, and she's just completely captivated by something outside the window.
Right.
It's like everyone else is focused on the party and having a good time, and she's just tuned into something completely different. Like she's seeing something that no one else is.
It's a great observation. I think Sophia's fixation on the window is one of the most important symbols in the story. It's like she's trying to see beyond what's right in front of her. Like she's trying to perceive something that everyone else is missing.
It's almost like she's seeing something terrifying out there, or maybe remembering something terrifying. She keeps saying, "There's this darkness. Don't you remember?" Is she talking about something from the past that she and the narrator share? Or is this darkness something bigger than that? Something more universal?
Yeah, that's the question that keeps you hooked as a reader. It's like you're trying to figure out all the layers of meaning behind her words. It could be a personal memory, but the way she says it, with that urgency and pleading in her voice, it kind of suggests something more, like something that could be haunting all of us.
Yeah. And, even though the story takes place at this party, Sophia seems totally isolated.
Right. Absolutely. Her isolation really drives home one of the main themes of the story, the disconnect between people. Even when they're surrounded by a crowd, it's like everyone's wearing a mask. They're all caught up in these superficial interactions, while Sophia's dealing with something much deeper, something more meaningful.
And it brings us to this other interesting element, the darkness itself. It's not just the absence of light. It feels like it represents something more sinister, something that's lurking beneath the surface of the party, and maybe even society as a whole.
Exactly. It becomes this really powerful symbol throughout the story. It could be societal problems or hidden secrets or even the dark side of human nature, the parts of ourselves that we try to hide.
It's like how we as a society often avoid uncomfortable truths. We'd rather just focus on the good stuff, the happy stuff. We distract ourselves with parties and social gatherings, but the darkness is always there, just out of sight.
That's such a great connection, and the story does a really clever job of using the setting to emphasize that point. You have this really opulent party, but there's this constant sense of unease underneath it all.
Okay, so let's talk a little more about the other guests at the party. They all seem to be acting a little strangely, almost like they're trying to avoid mentioning the darkness that Sophia is so fixated on.
Yeah, definitely. Their behavior just adds another layer to the story's exploration of denial. All the interrupted conversations, the fake smiles, the way they dance around any direct mention of Sophia's distress. It all points to this collective effort to keep up appearances, to pretend that everything's fine when it's clearly not. They're ignoring the elephant in the room, or in this case, the darkness outside the window.
And the fact that everyone is avoiding these uncomfortable topics makes Sophia's outburst even more jarring. She goes from being withdrawn and cryptic to practically hysterical. She starts challenging the men of science and their reliance on logic and reason. Why do you think she does that? What do you make of that outburst?
It's a huge turning point in the story, wouldn't you say? Sophia's rant against all the instruments and calculations could be interpreted as her rejection of a purely rational way of looking at the world. It's like she's calling for a deeper, more intuitive understanding of things.
It's like she's saying that there are things that science can't measure, truths that you can only feel and experience, not something you can just dissect in the lab.
Exactly. And her outburst challenges the reader, too, to think about whether we become too dependent on logic and data. Maybe we've lost touch with our emotions and our spirituality.
It's a really powerful message, especially in a world where it feels like technology and information are constantly bombarding us.
Absolutely. And the other guests are so uncomfortable with her outburst, they dismiss her as crazy, which really highlights the theme of societal denial.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if they see her as a threat, like she's disrupting their carefully constructed illusion of happiness and order.
Yeah, it's like she's trying to wake them up, shake them out of this complacency, but they're so stuck in their denial that they just refuse to see what she sees.
Which brings us to these two characters who seem to embody that denial even more than the other guests, the master butler and the head keeper. What do you make of them?
Oh, they're fascinating, aren't they? The The master butler with that creepy smile. It's like he's the face of the party's superficiality, this forced cheerfulness. And then you have the headkeeper with that ominous title, you know. It hints at something darker going on behind the scenes, something controlling.
And it's interesting how the story never actually tells us what the headkeeper is keeping. That's like the author wants us to fill in the blanks with our own fears and interpretations.
Yeah.
What do you think he's guarding?
That's a really good question. It could be an actual secret hidden somewhere in the manor, or maybe it's something more metaphorical, like the unspoken truths and the suppressed emotions that everyone at the party is trying so hard to ignore.
It's like he's a symbol of societal repression, keeping all the bad stuff locked away
Right.
so the party can go on without interruption.
Exactly. And his presence just adds to that sense of dread, the feeling that something's terribly wrong even though nobody wants to admit it.
And that dread just builds and builds until the story's climax with Sophia's apparent suicide. It's such a shocking moment. And what makes it even more disturbing is the narrator's intense connection to her. It's almost like they have this inexplicable bond.
Yeah, their encounter is so strange. It feels like it goes beyond time and logic. You know, it's as if their souls recognize each other. Like there's this connection that can't be explained rationally.
It's like they've met before, maybe in a past life or on some deeper level of existence.
Right. And that hint of mysticism just adds another layer to the story's exploration of perception and reality.
And then, right before she pulls the trigger, there's that chilling detail about her eyes flashing with a glee of insanity. Makes you wonder if her suicide is an act of desperation or if it's something else entirely.
Yeah, that line always gives me chills. It's like her final act isn't just driven by despair, but by some kind of twisted sense of triumph. This perverse embrace of the darkness that she's been warning everyone about.
It's almost as if she's choosing to become one with the darkness, to escape the denial of the party and the society it represents.
That's an interesting interpretation. It definitely raises questions about what freedom and rebellion really mean. Is Sophia's suicide a tragic loss, or is it a defiant act of self-liberation?
And then, just when you think you've kind of processed the tragedy, we get that final mind-bending twist. Sophia reappears at the window. It's like the story is messing with our perception of reality, blurring the lines between life and death, sanity and madness.
It's such a great twist. It makes you question everything you thought you knew about the story and the characters.
Is she a ghost?
Yeah.
Is the narrator hallucinating? Or something else going on? Something we just can't comprehend with our understanding of time and space.
The story doesn't give you any easy answers, and that's what makes it so captivating.
Yeah, it's like even in death, she can't escape this darkness. Or maybe she's choosing to embrace it. What do you think as the listener? What's the meaning of her coming back? Is she a ghost? Is it like a cycle of despair? Or is it like a challenge to the people at the party to finally face what they've been ignoring?
It's a powerful image to end on, that's for sure. And it definitely leaves you with a lot to think about. You know, this story. It's short, but it's full of symbolism.
It's amazing how a simple setting like a party can become a representation of society as a whole, with all its anxieties and secrets, and the darkness that we try to hide.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a really important takeaway for the listener. You know, this story, it encourages us to look beyond the surface, to question the masks we wear and the truths we try to bury.
It's a warning against becoming too complacent, getting so caught up in the party that we forget to look out the window.
Exactly. And it reminds us that we all have a little bit of Sophia in us, that longing for something more, the unease we feel in a world that can feel so superficial and chaotic.
And it's interesting how the story doesn't give us any easy answers. It leaves us to deal with the ambiguity and come to our own conclusions.
That's what makes it such a powerful piece of writing. It sparks conversation and allows for different interpretations. And ultimately, it forces us to confront our own relationship with darkness, both the darkness within ourselves and the darkness in the world around us.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this really thought-provoking story, I'm left with this one final question.
Yeah.
What do you think Sophia saw in the window? Was it her own inner turmoil? A premonition of society falling apart? Or something even bigger than that, something we can't even grasp? And what does that darkness represent in your own life? What are you choosing to ignore? What are you choosing to confront?
Those are great questions to consider. That maybe this deep dive has shed some light on some hidden corners of your own life. Or maybe it's given you a new way of looking at the stories we tell ourselves and the world around us.
Thanks for joining us on this journey as we explore meaning and symbolism. Until next time, keep those minds open, and don't be afraid to look into the darkness every now and then. You never know what truths you might find staring back at you.